Hi, my name is John Holladay. Um, Thrilled to be here. A little bit about me. I've lived in Utah for about 4 or 5 years now. And since my undergraduate, I went off and got a PhD in chemistry and have worked in the science field and biotech and other things for several years now.
Before you came here, what was your life like with your hearing loss?
Yeah, so my hearing loss was something that was really something I only noticed when my wife started asking me, "Do you have hearing loss?" And I joke about it a little bit, but the thing about hearing loss that I learned was that hearing loss is not something about I just can't hear. It's different frequencies that you lose. And I also have noticed since treatment that I also have a really hard time hearing in loud when there's a lot of background noise or a lot of loud noise around me. And so those have been the issues that I approached my physician and said, I probably ought to have a hearing test done, and he referred me to this office.
Can you share a specific moment when you realized it was starting to become a problem?
So, I would describe my hearing loss still as mild to medium. And it actually was, like, as I said, my wife telling me that she's thinking that I'm just not hearing like I used to and wondering if I had some issues. I didn't recognize it. I had to have other people tell me. And it was only after the treatment that I began to realize other symptoms that I had. The loud ringing that I had, I just never noticed it until I started having hearing treatment, and that started just going away.
Awesome. How was it starting to affect conversation with family and friends, or what was your wife really telling you was going on? What did she notice, I guess?
Yeah, I think my wife was just tired of me just saying, "I'm sorry, what? I didn't hear that." And as far as conversations with friends, I think I really noticed it a lot more at work. I worked for a small company. The CEO often spoke very quietly. I've really had a hard time understanding and hearing her. I couldn't hear well when there's a lot of background noise and needed help. Just really having to concentrate much harder than I wanted to on being able to hear and comprehend what was being said. So it wasn't just the hearing; it was actually comprehending what people were telling me that I began to notice I was losing some power.
How did that make you feel?
So it's interesting in how it made me feel. Wearing hearing devices was embarrassing for me, frankly. I feel that there's still a stigma. When I was very young and I first got glasses, what was really interesting for me was I could see leaves on trees as opposed to just green. And being able to kind of fine tune my hearing has been really helpful, and enough that I still feel when I was young, people would call people four eyes or things like that, but there really isn't a stigma around wearing glasses today. In fact, I think a lot of people think that wearing glasses make them look smart. I just don't feel that same with hearing, and so I was embarrassed to wearing my hearing devices in public, particularly when I was in a large meeting with a lot of people that I didn't know how they would react to me if they saw me wearing hearing devices. So the improvements, though, in the hearing really got me around that and saying, what, it's more valuable for me to be able to hear well than it is for me to be worried about how other people see me. But the other thing I really noticed was I didn't understand before I started wearing hearing devices how many people that I know and respect also wear hearing devices who are my age or younger, and really appreciated seeing that and feeling more in a community with people.
So you mentioned that your physician referred you here. Had you looked at other places before?
No, because I wasn't expecting the experience to be anything other than somebody sitting down with a machine and saying, raise your hand when you hear a sound. And I wasn't expecting it to receive a diagnosis that I needed help. I just wanted to essentially have my hearing that I could hear and that confirmed as I talked with my wife. So I didn't go and look at other places because I just didn't realize my issues.
What were you hoping treatment would do for you?
Yeah, what I was hoping treatment would do was to help me hear more of the higher pitched sounds that I was struggling with. It wasn't until after I started wearing the devices that I began to realize the value of the treatment of just being able to hear in a noising environment or things like that, because I didn't realize it. Again, much like when I was very young and first had glasses, I didn't really understand that I wasn't seeing well. I didn't understand that I wasn't hearing well. And so I wasn't expecting anything because I didn't really understand how bad my hearing was.
All right. You mentioned you kind of expected just to have a machine and somebody pressing a button to do a hearing test, but what did anything surprise you about the evaluation or treatment process?
Yeah, two things really stood out to me. And before I talk about those, I would like to just say how appreciative I was that the staff sat down with me and worked with me, answered questions, and spent about a half hour as I was just asking about, help me understand how hearing works, because frankly, I hadn't sat down and thought through how does the body hear? What are the things? How does hearing loss occur? But also just thinking, understanding the importance of or how hearing relates and having proper treatment helps in other parts of my total health that I'm worrying about. But in the process, it was shocking to me, to be sit into a quiet chamber and how extensive the hearing evaluation was, just not only on the different frequencies that, and seeing what frequencies I was hearing okay with, what frequencies I wasn't, but also understanding how I wasn't necessarily picking up sounds correctly. And that was very interesting to me. And then finally, the pieces of understanding that I was really struggling hearing in when there was background noise. I just wasn't expecting that, and I didn't have any idea how extensive a hearing examination was.
What changes have you experienced since starting treatment?
So, to me, surprisingly, because I didn't really recognize the extent that my tinnitus was also acting up, I just didn't realize how loud the tinnitus was until having the hearing treatment helped subdue that. And now, when I take my hearing devices off and late at night, sometimes that loudness just really comes on, and the tinnitus. I don't know if I'm even pronouncing that correctly. I hope it's okay.
Tinnitus, they're both the same.
So that was one of the things, just having the tinnitus really being helped was something I appreciated. But the other thing was just being able to not have to concentrate as much when there was a background noise and following a conversation. My wife and I often go for walks, and when we're walking, I hear street noise. And being able to understand and hear her without having to ask questions was important to me and a great surprise. I will say, it's a little bit more of the higher pitched sounds. I have some grandkids who have really high pitched sounds, and boy, do they scream loud. And so I do have a little bit of oops, I wish sometimes I wasn't being treated when they're speaking loud, but all in all, it's very worthwhile. I don't know.
I understand all that. I have hearing devices as well. I have a little bit of hearing loss, and so sometimes those really high-pitched things can really kind of get you by surprise. But you mentioned that you are hearing your wife better, or family. You mentioned earlier they're struggling at work. How has it helped you there?
I'll give you two examples of how it's helping me there. One, there are some people I work with who do speak very quietly, including the CEO of the company. And it does take a lot more mental energy when you have to really concentrate on hearing, and when you're worrying about, did I miss something? Did I hear something correct? When I'm concentrating that hard, I'm not necessarily taking the time to listen to what they're actually saying. I'm just trying to hear the sounds. And so being able to not have to work so hard on listening, on hearing, so I can listen, has been important to me. Hearing devices bring, though, a very funny benefit, and that is you'll never have to be in another boring meeting. And that is because your hearing devices act as earphones. And it's very nice to be able to take a call and have, I can hear it, but other people can't, things like that. Listen to a podcast while I'm out riding my bike without having to put in additional hearing device, something to hear with. It's just really, really nice. And so, not really your question, but something I really do enjoy.
I enjoy that too. I like I said, with my hearing aids, I use them on my bike all the time. I can still hear the cars coming, but I can hear the music that I'm trying to hear as well.
Exactly.
I do have some funny stories about people talking about using them at work. I have one patient who's an engineer, and he, when he came in for a follow-up visit, I noticed that he'd been doing Bluetooth streaming for like 7 hours a day, and I thought, uh-oh, he'd done something wrong. I'd instructed him something wrong, and so I asked him, and he looked at me and said, I have the most mind-numbingly boring job in the world, but I'm not allowed to turn on the radio. What my boss doesn't know doesn't hurt him. So he sat and listened to him all day long, so I thought that was kind of funny. What is your wife saying about your hearing with treatment going now?
I think my wife was really frustrated with me. She doesn't like repeating herself. And I think she really appreciates it, that I'm taking ownership of my health fully. And that includes all aspects of my health. I think she appreciates that I'm taking steps so I can hear her and be more responsive in my family.
You know, if you could go back in time, what would you tell yourself before getting treatment?
Yeah, I think one thing I tell myself is just get over yourself. Don't worry about what people think. People really don't care if you're wearing hearing devices or not. Get over yourself and go get treatment and just live life fully.
I tell people all the time that, you know, we're so used to seeing things on people's ears now with AirPods and Bluetooth headphones and everything. That stigma is definitely going away. What would you say to somebody who's hesitating about coming and getting treatment for their hearing loss?
Yeah, you know, I think two things are really important to me. And some of this might be unique to me, but one of those was understanding how hearing works, understanding how hearing loss occurs. I just enjoyed that. I didn't need to come in to learn those things, but it gave me a reason to want to learn more about that. But I'm treated with respect, and they give me the full time I need to answer my questions, which I really appreciate. But they also, the help afterwards. You know, I'm out hiking, I'm out biking, I'm out doing a lot of things. I get my hearing devices wet all the time. I've had batteries go bad because of corrosion, and they've been super helpful and just the service that I really appreciate. So I don't even remember what the question was. I hope those were
fantastic. If a friend asked you about your experience at Timpanogos hearing and tinnitus, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I would tell people, again, frankly, the overhead is low, right? I'm not coming to a fancy building with fancy stuff, yet the equipment that they need to do a proper examination is top notch. That's what I want to see. I want to see that they're putting the money into what is really needed to truly understand my hearing and to have the proper type of evaluation, diagnosis, and help. I want to make sure that I'm working with somebody who I can trust in, because there's so many different hearing devices out. You can go to different places and have low-cost things and high-cost things to make sure that I'm getting the value and the right value, and also that I'm having just the best options, that I'm taking advantage of the top technology and the best options. And then the follow-up care, I mentioned on the devices, but just following up to make sure that with the hearing devices, I am hearing better as we go back and do tests. So those are things that have been important to me.